forum today, I'm going to share with you a little bit of information, some sort of housekeeping matters regarding what's going on with our chapter. So let me share.
Hey, Lauren.
Yeah.
Could we just have everybody mute? Just so we don't have any background feedback.
Yeah. Thank you, Dara.
Thank you.
And then yeah, if everybody could, thank you, Dara, for thinking about that. So yeah, if everyone could mute their microphones, then that will allow for no background noise as we're moving forward with this meeting, okay? For now, there'll be an opportunity to ask questions, at which point you can unmute, but for right now, just so there's no background noise. All right, so as I mentioned, we are the Northwest Wayne chapter of Families Against Narcotics. This is our November public forum. And so I'm going to share a little bit of information with you on these PowerPoint slides. First of all, just for those of you who may not be familiar with FAN, I want to tell you a little bit about the organization. Families Against Narcotics is a nonprofit organization with approximately 20 chapters throughout Michigan. Our mission is, as you see on this PowerPoint slide, so the mission of all chapters is to provide education, resources, and support to families and individuals who've been impacted by addiction. And the chapters do it in a variety of ways. There's certain things that we all do, and then there are certain things that are unique to each chapter based on the needs of the community. So one thing that all of us do are the monthly public forums. And our chapter's monthly public forum is the first Monday of every month. Kelly Saldana, could you mute your...
Oh God, I'm sorry. I thought I muted it.
It was, there we go, thank you. So anyway, so our monthly public forum is the first Monday of every month. So obviously this is the first Monday of November, and we have our topic resources for family and friends who are struggling with a loved one's addiction. Our next public forum is going to be December 7th, which is the first Monday of December. As you know, I note on this PowerPoint slides that, normally we would have our public forums live in Canton at the Summit on the Park, but because of the coronavirus pandemic, we've been doing it for a while now via Zoom. And we also broadcast our public forums via Facebook Live. So we have a very active Facebook page. You might want to check that out. We have articles and all of our events are posted there as well. So you can see what we're doing through our Facebook page. We have a YouTube channel as well, as you can see on the PowerPoint slide. The YouTube channel is basically identified as NW Wayne Fan. We've had that for a couple of years, and all of our public forums and other events are recorded and are placed on that YouTube channel. So to the extent that you may be interested in seeing other speakers that we've had and other topics that we've covered relating to addiction, you can go to our YouTube channel and you can see that there. In addition to our monthly public forums, we have support groups. We have two support groups, one focused on family and friends, and one is a grief support group. You're going to be hearing more about both of those tonight. Both of the support groups meet the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. For a while, both of our support groups were meeting online, but recently our grief support group has begun meeting live again, and they meet at the PC Alano Club in Canton from 7 to 8:30 p.m. Our Stronger Together Family and Friends support group meets on Zoom, 6:30 to 7:30 p.m. And you can see on the PowerPoint slide, I've included the meeting ID and the password. So if this is something you think you might be interested in exploring, you can jot down the meeting ID and password and the times that it's happening, and you can check it out. So again, it's the second and fourth Tuesday of every month. Just a couple of other things I want to mention before we get started. If you are familiar with Families Against Narcotics, then you've probably heard about Hope Not Handcuffs. You may have heard about Hope Not Handcuffs, even if you're not familiar with Families Against Narcotics. So this is an initiative of FAN that was launched some time ago in 2017, to be specific. It's a partnership with police departments where participating police departments allow people struggling with addiction and seeking treatment to come into the police departments, request assistance through Hope Not Handcuffs. The police person there at the police department will contact our volunteer coordinator, who will arrange to have a volunteer, usually within 20 minutes, go to the police station to meet with the person and help get them into treatment. Oftentimes, that very same day, that's the goal, is to get them in the very same day. If not, it'll be soon thereafter. So we are launching Hope Not Handcuffs in Northwest Wayne, in the city of Wayne and the Garden City Police Departments. That's probably going to happen in the middle of November. I've got some information you can see on this PowerPoint slide if you want more information about it, other than what I'm sharing right now. You can email us and then we can give you some more information. If you want to be an angel, one of those people who is contacted and will go to the police department to help arrange to get the person the treatment that they need, then you can sign up and be trained to be an angel. So you can go to the main Facebook or the main website, familiesagainstnarcotics.org/Hope Not Handcuffs. And there you'll see their dates and times and places for trainings to be an angel. So if this is something that seems interesting to you, go check out the website, or you can send an email to us if you want more information and we can give you more information about that. I've already mentioned our Facebook page, Northwest Wayne Families Against Narcotics @Wayne Chapter Fan is how you can find us. And as I said, we post information almost daily on that Facebook page, articles and information that may be of interest to people dealing with addiction in their lives, as well as information about whatever events that we have going on, including all of our public forums. Okay, so now I'm going to go ahead and introduce our speakers for tonight. And I think I'm hearing again someone who hasn't muted. So if someone's recently joined it, just a reminder, if everyone could mute. Kelly, there we go. Kelly's muted. That'd be great. And all right, so let me introduce our speakers now. So again, our topic for today is resources for family and friends struggling with loved one's addiction. And our three speakers you can see pictured on this PowerPoint slide. Our first speaker is the beautiful lady on the bottom wearing the Run Drugs Out of Town shirt with the medal. This Tonya Napolitano. Tonya is she leads the Northwest Wayne Fan Grief Support Group. She's been a part of that group since its inception in July 2017. She's also received training in grief support through New Hope Center in Canton, and she's an angel. She serves as an angel with her Hope Not Handcuffs program. Tonya has a deep personal understanding of the grief that follows an addiction-related death. She lost her daughter to a drug overdose 4 years ago. Our second speaker will be Jackie Sanders. Jackie is an educator that's worked with many at-risk students and their families during her 20-year teaching career. When faced with her own son's substance use disorder 15 years ago, she struggled to find the help that she needed. Ultimately, she started her own support group called Heart Cry. In addition to facilitating the group's meetings, Jackie designed a 12-step plan specifically for family recovery, and she wrote a related handbook. Jackie's also a founding member of Northwest Wayne Fans Stronger Together Family Support Group. So I think there's still some people who are not muted.
Am I muted?
Kelly Saldana is not muted. There we go. Okay, so continuing on. So Jackie's guided the fan organization in rolling out the Stronger Together program to other chapters across the state. I'm proud to say that our chapter was the very first chapter that launched this. Thank you, Jackie. She's written program materials, including a plan for family recovery. She is the fan new launch liaison with respect to Stronger Together groups, and she's produced a training guide and provides support to group leaders. And then our third speaker is Phil Pavona. Phil retired from Sparrow Health Systems in 2011 following the accidental overdose death of his 25-year-old son, Eric. He became the founder and primary driving force behind the Okemos chapter of Families Against Narcotics. Phil was trained as a family recovery coach in 2013, and he has since that time provided supportive services to dozens and dozens of families. Phil credits a slew of mentors and trainers along the way, many of whom are very actively involved in the fan organization. One warranting mention is Mr. Joseph Lowe. Phil is honored and humbled by the fact that families are willing to allow him into their family circle as a means of support at such a difficult time. So with that, I am going to stop sharing my PowerPoint, and I'm going to turn over the microphone, such as it is, to Tonya. So go ahead, Tonya.
Hi, I'm going to start off with reading a poem that I found I thought it related to the grief group as well as why people come. Do you think that I am over it better than before? Maybe I've forgotten. Doesn't hurt me anymore. Do you think that I'm doing fine? No tears are shed each day. Get up and just get going. Pain all has gone away. Do you think that I am coping, living life as you do? If that's what you imagine, you don't have a single clue. I cope, I cry, and I deny. I've learned how I must hide, keep everything within me, bottled up deep down inside. I can't be who I was before. I've changed, I'm someone new. It happens when you have a loss, you would be different too. I'm so misunderstood each day, too tired to explain, not over it or better. Simply put, I'm not the same. Grief is a response to loss. It's in our minds and our hearts in a reaction to loss. It can cause an emotional crisis. They say that grief has 7 stages of pain, or 7 stages: pain, anger, bargaining, depression, upward turn, reconstruction, working through, acceptance, and hope. But our type of loss is sometimes it's hard to relate to. People sometimes don't know what to say. They don't understand all that we've been through long before the final end. There's a stigma that goes through with this type of loss. And oftentimes, along with this type of loss, there's guilt, there's regret, and it compounds this type of crisis and emotional feelings that we have to go through. When people come to this class, they come at all different times of stages. Some people will come and they'll just realize that it is it's too soon for them to come, and they'll wait and come later. Sometimes they'll come because they don't have anybody to reach out to at home, or the person that they're with is at a stage that they don't want to reach out. They don't want to open up, and they need somebody to talk to. Other people will come at different stages because they feel like nobody wants to talk to them about what they're going through, or they don't feel like they have anybody. And sometimes people will just wait until it's they're ready emotionally to open up about it. And so that's why, it's good to, for this class, because everybody's at different stages, when, in the group. And during our meetings, we take turns sharing, discussing challenges, offering ideas for upcoming times, difficult things like holidays, birthdays, anniversaries of the losses. Those are all difficult times that each person, is going through. And we offer, suggestions and ideas of how to handle it and how to, deal with it as it comes. And we, interact with each other about it. We offer support to each other. We give newcomers the opportunity to tell their story, but we never make them feel like they have to. We go around the room and we share our story. Sometimes that gives a newcomer the opportunity to feel like, maybe they want to share their story then. Sometimes it just makes them feel like they're not alone. And that's always an important aspect of it. And, sometimes that's all they need, is just to know that they're not alone. But it also, makes them feel like more comfortable to be able to share their story. I guess that's just, pretty much all I had to say is, that. And, we have different amounts of, the group differs from time to time, just depends on, there'll be people that will stop coming for a period of time and then they'll come back. It just depends on, where they're at in their stage. And, sometimes they'll, something will happen, something will trigger, some more emotions, and then they'll come back. And, we're always there.
So Tanya, this is you're describing the grief group that I mentioned at the beginning, right? In the
Yes.
PowerPoint slides.
Mhm.
People who've lost a loved one to addiction. And
Right.
this is for family members, but also for anybody who's lost a loved one to addiction.
Yeah. Yep.
Mhm. Yeah. Okay. Does anybody have any questions for Tanya? If you do, I'm going to invite you to put them in the chat. We're going to have questions afterwards as well for the group as a whole. But I thought if there might be some initial questions that people had regarding our grief group and grief support, I'd invite you to ask some questions right now. And seeing none at the moment. So I'm going to turn this over then to Jackie. So Jackie, you want to go ahead and
Sure.
your presentation? Thank you.
Yep. Well, I want to thank you for inviting me to speak tonight. I never say no to an opportunity to talk about family recovery. It has been my passion for the last 15 years, ever since my own son became drug involved. There are 20 million people right now in our country who are struggling with addiction issues. 20 million people who need and deserve the help of medical professionals, mental health care professionals, and really society in general, so they can return to leading productive, healthy lives again. But tonight, I want to talk about the other 20 million people, the other 20 million people who also need support. Because for every person who is struggling with addiction, there is at least one other person being significantly impacted. Typically, it's a family member, a parent, a sibling, a spouse, whose life is also being impacted as they watch their loved one's life being destroyed. It's a person who doesn't sleep at night because they're laying there in bed just waiting for the phone to ring with somebody telling them that their loved one has suffered an overdose. It's a person who's not functioning well at work anymore because they're so distracted by the issues going on in their home. It's somebody who is so stressed themselves that now their own physical, mental health has been impacted and they are seeking help for that. Maybe it's somebody like the two moms who have recently confided in me that they have considered taking their own lives so that they don't have to continue watching their child continue in their addiction. The needs of these 20 million other people are often overlooked. We are often forgotten about. And when we are acknowledged, we are often given table scraps. We are just given the leftovers of these resources and programs that were originally intended for our addicted loved one, even though our own needs are completely different. In addition, I think we are undervalued for the role that we could play in helping our loved ones recover. We know our loved ones, we are highly invested in their recovery, but unfortunately, we often remain an untapped resource in their recovery plan. As family members, we're often devastated when we discover that our loved one has a substance use disorder. And if our loved one is not open to working on their recovery at that moment, we often feel that our life has to be destroyed right along with theirs. But it doesn't have to be that way. It is possible for families to take control of their situations and return a sense of normalcy to their life, regardless of the decisions that their loved one is making. And that is what I'm sorry, I've forgotten to progress with my slides here. That's what this stages of change diagram illustrates. It shows the stages that family members go through when they decide to move from feeling despair to enjoying their life again. Psychologists use these stages of change when they're talking about any life change we might make, maybe something like a new job or maybe a divorce. Typically, change is not instantaneous, although we often perceive it that way, but usually it happens gradually. Let's just say, for example, you decide that you're going to start exercising. That's not an instantaneous change. Usually, maybe a few months ago, you went to the doctor, he pointed out your need for exercise. Then maybe after that, your spouse mentioned it. And so even though it hadn't been on your radar before, this was up here in pre-contemplation, now the doctor's brought it to your attention and you contemplate it and you say, yeah, you know what, I can see I really need to do something. Your next stage is preparation. Maybe in the preparation stage, you look around for a workout partner, you check out a few gyms, maybe you look and see how could it fit into your schedule, how could it fit into your budget. And then you take action. You join the gym, and soon after then, it's become part of your life. It's part of your routine. So that's how you move through the stages of change if you decide to exercise. It's similar if you are a family with an addicted loved one. You start up here in the pre-contemplation stage, which I call I'm stuck. Those families often feel that they have no recourse. They aren't aware of any options. They have a 30-year-old son who is living in their basement. They know he's using drugs and alcohol. He hasn't had a regular job in a few years. They are paying for his cell phone. They are paying his car insurance. They've tried talking to him about this, but he just hasn't made any change. And they feel like there are no options for them. But with support, they can move to the contemplation stage. They can come out of their denial and realize that their son actually has a substance use disorder and that they cannot go on in life like this, that something has to change. And so they come down to the preparation stage where they have a plan. And that plan might involve things like discussing the need for treatment with their child. They might check out some treatment options. They might seek some help from some professionals. And then they move to the action stage. And that is where they're going to ask their 30-year-old son to leave their home. They're going to say, either you must leave by the end of the month or you must go into a treatment program. And then over time, they can reach the final stage, which is this maintenance stage where they are enjoying life again. They return a sense of normalcy to their life, regardless of whether or not their family member has changed. You know, of course, it's what we hope happens, that our family member enters recovery, but even if they don't, we can find this life that brings us joy and happiness again. I could easily talk a whole hour on the stages of change because recovery, both for our loved one and for ourselves, is really hard work. Professional help is often needed as you move from one of those stages to the next. But a good secondary resource in helping you move through those stages of change can be a support group, or you can think of it as a discussion group. Our fan chapter started a group like that called Stronger Together a few years ago. And based on our model, the fan organization is working to roll these groups out across the state. And at a Stronger Together meeting, people share their challenges, their experiences, they exchange resources. It's a really simple concept because it's just one family with an addicted loved one helping another family with an addicted loved one. Stronger Together groups reference a recovery plan that was written specifically for them as family members. It is based on 12 foundational principles. Just like many individuals with substance use disorder follow a 12-step plan in AA or NA to help with their recovery, our Stronger Together group follows these 12 foundational principles to support family recovery. And so we're going to take a few minutes here to go through those foundational principles. Step number one is facing reality. I admit my child is abusing drugs or alcohol. So we come out of denial and we face the fact that our loved one's use of drugs or alcohol has become a serious problem in their life. It is not just that they had too much to drink at the family wedding last weekend. It is not that they used some marijuana at a party last summer. It is a level of use that is now significantly interfering with their lives. And once you acknowledge that, there can be no other response really, except for sadness, profound sadness, if you understand what a substance use disorder is really about. In fact, for many people, they will describe it as feeling grief. I grieve the loss of a healthy relationship with my child and the expectations I have for their future. It is healthy and normal to have expectations for your child, right? Like they're going to graduate from high school. We just assume that. They're maybe going to go on to college. They'll get a job. Maybe they'll have an apartment or a home. Perhaps they'll start a family of their own. But once you acknowledge that addiction, you realize that many, if not all of those expectations are lost. The first things I had to grieve were that my son had dropped out of college. He had lost his athletic scholarship. He had lost his girlfriend. And it just got much worse because actually you'll come to the point where you often grieve the loss of that person. The person you once knew is gone. You're looking at this person in front of you and you feel like you don't even recognize who they are. So you are grieving the loss of a person who is still alive. And in the midst of that grief, you often begin to wonder, how did this happen to you? How did this happen to your family? And you begin to think that perhaps you did something yourself that may have caused or contributed to their addiction. And that is step number 3. I release my burden of guilt by refusing to accept responsibility for my loved one's decisions. Often the guilt we feel is false guilt. It is accepting responsibility for something we didn't cause or something that wouldn't have made much of a difference anyway. In our group, we learned that everybody makes mistakes in their parenting, but typically we did the best we knew how to do at the time. I know that one of the things I was plagued by, at least for a few weeks, I got it in my mind that if I had just encouraged my son to join that high school wrestling team, he wouldn't have become addicted to drugs. So we have to face those issues of false guilt that we bring up. And if we have genuinely contributed to their situation, we can always ask our loved one for forgiveness. But ultimately, our loved one is responsible for their own actions because we are powerless to control them. We cannot control another person. And that leads us to step 4. I recognize I am powerless to control my child's behavior, and my worry is unproductive. The words of the Serenity Prayer can be a powerful reminder that we cannot control another person. Do you remember how that prayer starts out? God, grant me the serenity to accept the things I cannot change. We come to see that we cannot control our child's actions. And worry is just another attempt to do that. It is trying to control another person through our mental thoughts. We can't do that. So if you are trying to track them, their whereabouts using an app on your phone, or maybe you're driving past their place of employment to see if they're really there, you're wasting your time. You cannot control another person. And actually, we discover that letting our loved one take control of their own life can ultimately help them in leading them to recovery. And that is step number 5 addresses that. And I think step number 5 is the most difficult principle to work through. I refuse to support my child's destructive behavior, and I allow my child to experience the natural consequences of their actions. If we take over responsibility for our child's life, we deny them the opportunity to learn important life lessons. It is not helpful if we intervene every time they have a problem in an attempt to keep our child comfortable. That's because the pain of their addiction must become greater than the perceived pleasure of their using if they are going to change. Your mantra as a family member needs to be more pain, less pleasure, more pain, less pleasure. It is not that we are out to intentionally harm them. We are not seeking revenge, but we allow them to experience the natural outcome of their decisions. Just like in real life, you don't make your car payment, your car is repossessed. So we step out of the way and we give our child the dignity of controlling their own life. As we begin to shift some of that time and focus that we were pouring into them, we shift some of that back to ourselves and the rest of our family. And we acknowledge the negative impact our child is having on our family, and we take necessary steps to restore peace to our home. That is one of the mistakes that I made with my own family. I ignored the needs of my compliant child. He needed a peaceful environment in our home. We talk about this often in our Stronger Together group. Living in a peaceful home is your right. You don't need to defend that to anyone. You don't need to justify that. You can take whatever steps are necessary, even if that means asking your loved one to leave your home. I promise you can do that in a way that comes from a place of love and points them towards recovery. And as you restore peace to your home, then you can begin to find a better balance to your life. Step 7, I develop strategies to promote my own physical, mental, emotional, and spiritual health. Every area of your life has been affected by your loved one's addiction, and you need to begin addressing and correcting that. You need to eat well, you need to sleep well, exercise, you need to spend time with people you love, you need to restore your spiritual life. You don't want to be making decisions while you're caught up in chaos. You want to be calm, you want to be thoughtful, you want to be rational in your decision making. And as you take better care of yourself, you begin to have a slightly different perspective of the addiction experience. Even though addiction is a devastating situation, you realize that something good could come out of this experience. It could even be a turning point in your own life. And that is step number 8. I identify ways in which good can emerge from my circumstances. The experience of addiction is horrific, but difficult times are going to change us, right? They're going to change us either for the better or for the worse. And it is up to us to decide. You can bring meaning and purpose out of this situation. For example, you could become a more empathetic person. You could help other people in similar circumstances. That's what I've done to bring meaning out of it. You can become a different person, a better person. You don't have to stay mired in sadness or in bitterness. You can begin to leave some of that hurt behind you, which is step 9. I forgive the hurt my child is causing me, and I remain open to future reconciliation. I know some of you are shaking your heads and think, no, I can't do that. I cannot forgive the person for the way that they have hurt me. I understand that. That's why, for one thing, it's step number 9. You can work your way up there. This is heroic forgiveness that I'm talking about. It's forgiveness that is not contingent on anything your loved one does or does not do. You are not going to forgive them because of who they are. You are forgiving them because of who you are. You don't bring up past hurts without reason. In the middle of an argument, you don't just throw it out there. You don't dwell on those thoughts. When they come to your mind and how you've been hurt, you dismiss them. You get busy with something else. You don't seek revenge on the person. You might need to take some very firm measures to make sure they don't continue to hurt you. But once you forgive them, you are relieved of carrying around that burden of bitterness, and you are free what you are meant to do, which I believe is to love them. Oh, I might have lost my slides there. I'm sorry. That's okay. We'll finish up without them. So we are on step number 10, unconditionally loving our child. So I make the decision to love my child unconditionally. I treat them with dignity and respect. One of the first disturbing thoughts that we have about our loved ones when we discover they're using is that you realize that you don't like them much anymore. That's just the reality. People who are addicted to drugs or alcohol are not pleasant to be around. But what is even more disturbing is then you begin to question whether you even love them or not. I think it helps to use a very basic definition of love: treating somebody with dignity and respect. You can do that even if they don't treat you that way. So I believe your primary role in this whole experience is to be a loving parent. And I don't say that to be sappy, but you're not their peer coach. You're not their 12-step sponsor, because most of us do not have that shared experience of addiction. We really don't know what that is like. You are not their therapist or their counselor, because we don't have the training for that, right? Our role is to love them. Research shows that having unconditional love has benefits in every aspect of a person's life. So we encourage them, we support them, we help them locate resources, we come and work alongside them in an effort to point them to recovery. We don't let them pressure us, we don't let them manipulate us. Instead, we focus on doing what is in their best interest, even if that is hard, even if it makes them angry or uncomfortable, because that is our way of loving them through their addiction. And then, since that's my only job now, is to love them, right? I can go on to step number 11, which is releasing them. I let go, I relinquish my hold on my child, and I acknowledge that my responsibility for parenting is done. There comes a time when you have to acknowledge that your responsibility for raising a child is over. You're always going to be their parent, right? But that job of raising them is done. You've done all you can do. Your work is finished. And that is the natural progression of the parenting role, right? We start out with this little baby that is totally reliant on us, and our objective is to put ourselves out of a job. We want to relinquish our child, absolve ourselves of taking responsibility for their life, and we place responsibility on their shoulders. That's where it belongs. You resign from being manager of their life. And as you look ahead now, you can see a future for yourself, which is step number 12. I find hope by focusing on my future and living a life of purpose. We all pray that our child will find long-term recovery. And if they decide they want to pursue that, having worked through our own recovery already, we are going to be in a great position to help them. But we don't know if they will go into recovery or not. They could struggle with addiction their entire life. Whether they do or not, we can return a sense of normalcy to our own lives. We can find purpose and joy in life again. You may be wondering if I made this all up. I didn't, not really, because I lived it. I lived all 12 of these steps. And then I started helping other families live these 12 steps. And then I wrote it all down. And that is why I can assure you that there is a path that begins with despair and can end in hope. I have seen what a difference a group like Stronger Together can make in the lives of families. One of our group members recently emailed me to say this. We both have a hard time putting into words exactly how this group has changed our lives in numerous ways. We are stronger, bolder, and we have freedom like we didn't have before. So I hope that you'll take advantage of joining us at a Stronger Together meeting. We start each meeting, we read through the 12 steps, then we spend a little bit of time focusing in on one of them. Then every person, if they want, they have the opportunity to share their personal situation and concerns. And then other people in the group just offer support and encouragement and share resources with them. We meet the second and fourth Tuesdays of the month at 6:30 p.m., typically in Canton, but right now we are meeting on Zoom, and that has surprisingly gone extremely well, I think. Our next meeting then would be Tuesday, November the 10th, that's next Tuesday, and we can post the Zoom link in the chat for that. Also, I had my email address posted, but I don't have my slide, but it is my name. You can see that below my picture there. It's all one word, Jacqueline Sanders at AOL.com. I am always interested in hearing from people, always willing to talk to somebody on the phone. I'll be happy to send you a copy of the 12 steps. We have a little booklet, if you would like, that goes along with that. I have other documents that I've written on related topics. If you would like some of those, I'd be happy to send those to you as well. because I never do pass up an opportunity to talk to people about family recovery. Thank you.
Thank you, Jackie. And so you mentioned a couple of things. So hold on one second here. And I just wanted to share. Hold on one second. Oh, I'm losing it. Never mind. Can't do it. A glitch in the it's the same kind of glitch that you're experiencing, maybe.
Yeah, I don't know what happened. It's just gone. That's okay.
Yeah, I just want to, let's try this. Let's see if this works. Okay, so I just wanted to, everyone can see it now, I think. So this is the meeting time and the days. So the second and fourth Tuesday of every month, as Jackie had mentioned. And it's on Zoom from 6:30 to 7:30. And so if you're interested in exploring that, you might want to jot down the meeting ID and the password. I think also I mentioned earlier, and I can't remember which slide here. This is the email address. So if you didn't get a chance to jot it down, or you're after the fact realize you want more information about this, Jackie's offered a lot of resources just now. Send an email to this email address, referencing this meeting and mentioning what you're looking for, and we can get you the information that you're looking for. All right, so let me stop sharing this now. Does anybody, before we move on to Phil, does anybody have any questions for Jackie?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay.
Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay. I'm struggling here. My battery's died, and then I got it plugged in now. But I had a problem. Is the password going to be the same every time I go to log in? Because my probation officer sent me a link for this, and I did it last week. But the email I got today, I could barely read it, and so I found the password of the one I did first. So can I just keep using that the way I got it? I got it set my phone where I could just hit that one and I can log on. So is that the same?
Yes, you can. The meeting ID and the
Okay.
password are the same for both the public forums and for the family and friends support group meetings.
Okay, great. Because I'm new at all this here. So.
Okay. And does anyone else have any questions? You can throw it in the chat, or if you have a question, you can unmute and ask your question of Jackie.
Well, I have one more thing, if you don't mind.
Go ahead.
She was speaking about, having somebody to talk to. My 17-year-old daughter committed suicide 5 years ago. And she's right. At that time, there was nothing anybody could say that you can say. There's nothing you can say. But there was one guy, and he was a friend of mine. Well, he wasn't a friend of mine, but I worked with him. And me and him actually didn't get along too well. But I'll never forget this. A couple of days after my daughter did that, he came to my house and he knocked on the door. And he just said, "How you doing?" He said, "Can I come in?" And I said, "Yeah." So we went, sat down in the living room, and never said another word. Never said another word. Neither one of us did. But he sat there for about an hour, and he said, "Okay, Lance." He said, I got to leave now." But he left. But that meant more to me than anything anybody could have said or did, because he let me know that he was there, but he also didn't pretend that there was anything he could say that would make me feel any better. You know what I'm saying? He knew that I needed somebody, but do you understand what I'm trying to say? It just
Totally. And I think,
it meant
again,
a lot to me.
yeah, I totally understand. And I know that Tonya, in particular, when she with the grief support group, completely understands what you're saying. But yes, many of us have lost loved ones, not for the same circumstances, but yeah, I think we all I understand what you're saying.
Thanks for sharing that,
Lance.
Yeah, thanks for sharing. I think that all of us benefit from just being around other people who understand what we're going through. That's the point of our support groups. Thanks, Lance.
Yeah.
I agree. Thanks.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to introduce Phil Pavona now. I already gave you an introduction regarding who he is. Phil, you want to take it away?
Can you hear me? Okay, good. Lauren, if you could bring up the outline, go ahead and bring that up. And while you're doing that, one of the things I wanted to say before it gets any further down the line here is, you know, both of the presentations that we've already heard, that you've already heard, you know, these are really life and sanity savers, these groups. And I would encourage anyone in the community to take advantage of them. Because again, if you happen to know someone in the community that's lost a loved one, mention that that grief group is available. We have a grief group at our chapter as well. And we hear all the time from those folks how great it's been to be with a group that has walked in those same shoes and has experienced the same kind of thing. And for me personally, I can tell you one of my wife's and my best friends now are another family that we met at our grief group. And again, you obviously have something in common. And from that something in common, we became great friends with them. And to this day, we go on vacations together down in Florida, and we just have a really great time. The other thing that we experienced with our grief group was the whole group became friends. And once every couple of months, they would pick a day to go out to dinner. I mean, it just became kind of a little club. And again, I think these, you know, what Jackie's worked on and what the grief groups do, these really are life and sanity savers. So please take advantage of them. The other thing I would say for your grief group, if you haven't done it yet, if you can, we contacted our funeral homes, and they have a flyer at the funeral home that actually explains our grief group. And we have had many people join our grief group specifically from having seen that flyer that was available in the home. So anyway, thank you very much.
Yeah, thanks, Phil. Actually, we've given the local funeral homes a whole folder of information about the various groups, including the grief group. So we are totally with you on that. All right, let me share the information that you are looking for here. All right, do you see everyone see it?
Yep, thank you.
And you can just tell me how when do you want me to move through it?
Yep, just leave it right there for a while.
Yep.
One of the first things I want to be able to explain is what a family recovery coach is and what its mission and goals are. And, you know, just like those seeking recovery find it very helpful to have peer recovery support, so do families who are looking to be able to maintain and seek their own recovery. And that's what a family recovery coach is providing for them. And I often get asked, you know, the difference between like anything that's a recovery coach and a sponsor or a mentor, whatever it happens to be. And there are some differences. Even, you know, and again, I'm looking at the family recovery coach, but this is the truth for the peer recovery coach as well, a difference between a sponsor. The first thing is they're trained. And so a typical sponsor isn't trained. It's someone that you meet at a meeting or whatever it happens to be. But when you get a recovery coach, you're finding someone who has specifically gone out and gone to a class. They're usually like 36 hours, had training specific to trying to be able to help to the extent that they can. Secondly, you can trust these folks, which often you never know in the community what you might find. And so at FAN, we've tried to put that together, training someone you can trust, someone who's walked in those shoes, someone who can provide some help and support. As you see, our mission is to provide help, healing, and hope to families impacted by addiction. So we offer support and guidance to them. We help them develop strategies. We assist them. It's a non-judgmental environment. We help them establish boundaries. We allow them to find out what's in the community and help them with community resources. And, you know, this last part here, our coaches can not only work with a single family member, but an entire family. For instance, the family that I work with tomorrow night, it is mom and dad, grandpa and grandma, 2 older sisters, one who's married, and so her husband joins, an uncle that happens to be down in Atlanta who's a physician, and this kid's best friend and his fiance. So that's a huge group. I mean, you're talking about 8, you know, people that are part, and that says something about them. They're willing to invest the time and effort to try to navigate a system so that they can be the very best example, not only in healing themselves, but in providing a template for their own son as well. And as difficult as COVID has been, as we know, in-person meetings are so much better than what we try to do with what we're doing now. The family recovery coaching works pretty well with Zoom. because it does allow you to touch people that are part of the family that are nowhere within the community, okay? And it also allows you to help the family who may be broken themselves. I've got families where mom and dad are divorced, yet they still have the best interest of their son in mind, but they happen to live in 2 different cities, even 2 different states. And therefore, you can provide that kind of support and emphasis by doing this. So when you look at the life background, go ahead and bring it down just a little bit, Lauren, so we can see the bottom part here. The background of someone, they have a life experience in dealing with someone with substance use disorder. So Jacqueline could obviously do this very, very well, obviously, with what she does with her 12-step program. You have a compassion to want to help families heal. You do attend the CCAR Recovery Coach Academy. You have some knowledge of other meetings that are out there. And to be honest with you, I've always preferred our meeting over those, including what Jackie does with the 12-step meeting, mostly because there's crosstalk and it's educational. And often at Al-Anon meetings, and I don't knock Al-Anon meetings, they're great, but they miss those 2 keys that I think can be very, very helpful for families in need. You pass background checks, a sex offender registry check, you pass a drug screen, and you must be able to have reliable transportation, because obviously I typically do this at their homes or what I call my office, which is sometimes McDonald's. We meet at McDonald's because for $1 you could drink, 10 root beers over the next hour while you're sitting with them. So we often do it there as well. So now that you know kind of what the background is and what a family recovery coach is trying to accomplish, how do you access one? Well, there's many ways to do it. The easiest way, obviously, is you can go on the Families Against Narcotics website. And there's a spot there on the website that talks about some of the services that they provide. And one of them is an area where it says family recovery coach. And so you can click on that, fill it out, and you'll have one assigned. And again, you may be in an area of the state where right now there's not a family recovery coach. That shouldn't stop you, because there are family recovery coaches throughout the state that can help long distance, as I've just mentioned before. The very first thing that I do as a family recovery coach is obviously we get their permission, and I also do a family and SUD client intake. As a person who has often also helped people who struggle with addiction, I don't know that I can be of very much help if I don't know what the circumstances are and the background. And so when I do an intake, I try to find out as much as I can about both the person who struggles and their family, and what the family dynamics are, and what they've done in the past, and what they haven't done in the past, and what they found to be fruitful and helpful, and what they found to be kind of as a roadblock or whatever. And so again, one of the very first things I do is I take that history. And some families that I meet are very new to the process. Other families I meet, they may have been going through this for 10 years. And obviously, if they've been dealing with this for 10 years, they have learned some things through experience, but we hope to catch them earlier so that they can learn from other people's experiences and hopefully not make the same mistakes that many of us made when we had no peers to take care of us in trying to learn this. And so obviously, that intake is an important thing. And again, Lauren, if you can drop her down a little bit so I can see it as well. One of the very first things I do after having taken their history and kind of found out what the family dynamics are and that type of thing is we have a self-assessment matrix that we send, okay? And the self-assessment matrix is intended to find out where they are right now, because the intent behind this program is to help them move forward and have a skill set and a comfort level that is much better when we're done with our sessions. And so that self-assessment sheet kind of talks about everything from what their knowledge base is of addiction, to how it's affected their finances, to how it's affected their physical and mental health, their work life, everything else that's going on. And so what I often do is I have them do that self-assessment sheet in 2 ways. If they've been doing this for dealing with this for several years, I'll say, well, let's go back to that first year. How would you fill in this self-assessment sheet based then? And how would you fill it in now? Because I also want them to be able to recognize some of the things that they've been able to do on their own time and in their own efforts over time. And so a self-assessment matrix is very, very important. The next thing I do is I send them addiction materials. Okay, and this is a little bit out of order. And we do the self-assessment matrix now first, because part of what we're trying to do in offering this program throughout the state is we're trying to demonstrate and learn from our clients what is it that we could be doing a little bit better. And so we're starting to keep all of this data. And so when we look at the self-assessment matrix, we do it in the beginning, we do it in the middle, and then we have one at the very end that we provide as well. But as far as addiction materials, I send some addiction materials, which is kind of 2 videos. It's what I use. And if you've ever seen the Nugget video, it's a great video. It explains addiction about as simplistically as anyone in the world could explain it. It demonstrates that fact that you can get caught up into it really, really quickly, because in the very beginning stages, everything feels good and your landing is a perfect landing and you can go on with your life. Well, that doesn't last for very long. And then the second video I use, and if you're familiar with Dr. Corey Waller, he has a lot of brain chemistry tutorials. And so it kind of answers the question, why can't my kid just stop? And I do this not to create a sense of having the parents feel sorry for their kid and therefore enable them. But if they don't understand addiction, they won't understand one of the things that may be necessary for their kids to get better in the future. And, you know, I do spend time talking about their son or daughter, because it surprises me. And I guess if I look back at in dealing with our own son, it shouldn't, but it surprises me that most parents have no idea of what true recovery could look like for their son or daughter. They don't have an idea of what is necessary for recovery for a son or daughter. They think, well, geez, my kid's gone to rehab 5 times, seems to have a good attitude when he comes out of rehab, but within weeks relapses again. Well, when you find out what their rehab was, you know, it was 10 days somewhere. And I'm sorry, if you're a heroin addict, 10 days somewhere ain't gonna buy it. It's just not enough time. And so often the parents don't understand that about addiction. And so one of the things we try to do is to also educate them on what a healthy plan can look like. And I'll get to that in a minute. We have a matrix for helping versus enabling. And again, it's kind of a self-sufficiency thing where they sit down and they kind of answer questions. Have they ever done this? And the interesting thing is there are some questions and or some parts of that matrix where if the circumstance is different, the same thing under one circumstance could be enabling, but under a different circumstance could be supporting. And so we purposely try to play act different scenarios as to when it might be something that you could view as supporting and when it could be something that you could view as enabling. And, you know, we try to let them know, look, if it's geared, as Jackie said, you know, obviously we want them to realize that when their loved one is doing the right thing, seeking treatment, that it's going to be an open door policy. But if for whatever reason they're continuing to use and go down a different path, we want to make it as difficult for them as possible to do the wrong thing. We want them to have to dodge bullets, jump over a fence, swim through shark-infested waters to get to the drug. But if they're doing the right thing, seeking treatment, their behavior is changing, we want to demonstrate an open door policy. Because as Jackie said, that will get them quicker to the point where they're sick of being sick, and they realize that their life can be easier if they choose a different path. And so our helping versus enabling metrics really kind of helps with that. We have a whole tutorial on healthy boundaries and defense coping mechanisms. And again, we're trying to get our moms and dads and other folks that are part of the family, we're trying to get them to step back and view themselves as to what have they done in the past. Has that worked before? Why might that not work? And how might they do that differently? Because as Jackie has said with the 12-step program, which incidentally I use, I don't go into it anywhere near as much as Jackie does and or our group, our family recovery group does when they have our programs thrown together. But, you know, as Jackie has said before, we really want to get to a time when no matter where their loved one is, they are comfortable at where they're at. They can have peace in their home. They can have joy again in their life. They can know that they're doing the right thing. They can set their guilt aside and move on. The 12-step program, and I'm not even going to ask Lauren to put it up. I do it in one session. And to be honest with you, the reason I do it in one session is because I then encourage the family. Look, throughout the state, we have a lot of groups that provide this over the internet, and it's the greatest thing since sliced bread. And, you know, Jackie didn't mention this, but typically, and I went through Jackie's training on this, and she did a great job. She deserves all the kudos in the world on this program. It really is a great program. It's typically a year program. We go over a step a month. And so what our group does is we have 2 sessions a month, every 2 weeks. And in that session, we do 1 step. And so the next month, we would then go through in step 2, and the next month, step 3. Well, obviously, when I'm doing this, I do it over about an hour session. And I run through them and I explain to them what each of those steps mean. And at the very end, I give them the ability to have some place to go on the internet to actually tap in to be able to find a place to do this program. And I tell them, this program will help you. It is an absolute great program. In particular, the very end of those sessions involves a lot of crosstalk between the families and allows them to help each other. Because again, there are some families that are new to this, some families that have been going through this for a very, very long time. The last thing I generally do, and I'm going to have you put this up if you can, Lauren, the SUG recovery plan outline and where the family fits in. Now, although I said I do this last, it depends. I can tell you that with my last 2 families, their loved ones who happen to be in rehab right now took part in this. Okay, the actual son, one was a son and one was a daughter for a different family. Right through, we got permission through the rehab facility that they could join us on Zoom while our family went through this program. And let's face it, there is nothing I'm telling the families that should be hidden from their loved ones. You know, there's nothing I wouldn't be willing to share with whoever it is. And so right off the bat, the person who's struggling is getting an idea of, look, we're trying to help your family, your parents, your brothers and sisters better understand addiction and what's really necessary for a good program for you to succeed. And therefore, we're trying to put the mom and dad in a position of authority to kind of know what maybe the next step could and should be to have success. And so the program that I use, I call it STEPS, and the STEPS is simply meant for something that you could easily remember with each letter. The S stands for support. And what we say then is, look, if you want to know what's going to be successful for your family and for your son to eventually get to the point. Now, granted, if the kid, you know, I guess I'll step down to 3 keys to success first. The very first one's going to be that person's attitude. If their attitude isn't one where they're ready to get better and ready to invest time and effort in moving forward, then the second one, which is giving it enough time and transitioning into skill sets, isn't going to occur. But many of the families that I meet, they'll say, our son has tried. He just can't do it. And that's why I need to know, what has your son tried? You know, I mean, because they really have no idea of what success could look like. And so again, support, what is that? Well, that's family, friends, recovery coach, peer meetings, sponsors, cognitive behavioral therapists, physician, court personnel if they're in the court system. And again, what I say is your loved one should name them. They should know what their email address is. They should know what their telephone number is. They should know exactly what it is that they're willing to do and able to do in the community. And I tell the family all the time, look, I'm not going to be your kid's therapist. I'm not going to be his peer recovery coach. I can be your peer recovery coach. I know what it feels like to be a parent. I've never been an addict myself, but they're available in the community. And what you'll often find is, you know, they get out of rehab and they're told, go to meetings and get a sponsor. Well, that's great. That's two tools, but you can't build much of a house with a hammer and a nail. You got to have wood and concrete and siding and everything else, you know? And so that's what the support system is. And it shocks me to this day, because I think we know more about addiction today than we used to before. None of their sons or daughters who are willing to try to do something different to get clean have had a recovery coach, have gone to a cognitive behavioral therapist, see their physician on a regular basis, view the court personnel as being something you want to run towards instead of away from. And so again, I think it's very, very, very easy to let them know there is a way to do this. And so the transition, that's the T. You know, what is their family transitioning? What is your son going to transition back to after jail? What is he going to transition back to out of rehab? Do it ahead of time. The worst thing for an addict is to act on impulse. If you allow an addict to act on impulse or it's not organized, it's going to create pressure on them and they're probably going to do the wrong thing. So in the past, what has your son or daughter done as a transition? What's occurred in that transition? And often it's been nothing. They've come back home and then they just assume their son or daughter has gained all this knowledge in 14 days at Brighton that they're going to be able to institute and have success with. And it just doesn't work that way when you're a heroin addict or a meth addict or a crack cocaine addict. And so transition and a transition plan is important. Encouragement. Encourage your loved one. They get beat up by society. There's a stigma attached to it. At the very least, you can encourage them to begin to do the right thing. And again, when you look back at some of Jackie's steps, a lot of them had that in there. And then the P is the past. The past is the past. You can't change it. It's dead weight. Okay. And often what parents do, and again, Jackie's program does this great, you know, you tend to get into this argument where it's you. The kid's saying you to the parents are saying you to the kid, and you get into this dance that you've had for years and years and years that is difficult to get past. And so what I say is, look, I know your kid may have stolen from you. I know you may have done these types of things, but you know what? Bring it to the present, try to figure out how to never do it again and move on from it, and that's it. Don't bring it up anymore, because nothing good is going to happen from you bringing up the $3,000 that your kid stole from you last year, or the time that he crashed your car, or whatever else it is. All it's going to do is create more chaos and more pain, and it won't go anywhere. So leave the past in the past. And then the last S is sobriety. When you're dealing with heroin or meth or crack cocaine, those really serious drugs, the first 3 months, it's all about sobriety. It's not about relationships. It's not about work. And that's something that parents think, well, geez, when he gets out, he's not really doing anything. We're trying to encourage him to go back to work or whatever it is. It's probably too early for them to do that. That doesn't mean they should be lazy. They should be getting hooked into the recovery community. They should be volunteering their time through the recovery community. Because again, those first 3 months of their freedom sobriety, not in jail sobriety, not in rehab sobriety, but the first 3 transitioning back are very, very important to them. And if they don't get it right, they're not going to keep a job anyway. They're not going to have good relationships anyway. They're not going to be able to function in school anyway. And so that's part of that time thing that we talked about with the 3 keys to success. And so those 3 keys to success: attitude, time, transition, recovery toolbox. The time thing, I mean, when you watch Dr. Corey Waller's videos, he'll tell you, look, you need that amount of time. It's necessary for their brain to begin to heal, for them to be able to have some amount of motivation to work a plan that can be personal to them and good for them. And the time to do that may be right at getting out of rehab, but don't expect miracles in a week. That's why it takes time to develop and get all the people that are going to be part of your recovery toolbox, because that 3rd key is going to involve skill sets and people. And how do you develop those skill sets? You usually develop through people. And so anyway, what else should be part of this not enabling plan if you're going to have your kid in your life? Because many of these kids are coming back home, okay? And I have no qualms with that occurring, providing the parents know how to set the boundaries and to be able to say, this is what's going to be necessary for you to come home. And if you're willing to do these things, then we'll have you home. These are some of those things. We know what their triggers are. Technology is often a trigger. Their phone is often a trigger. And what I say to parents is, look, you know what? If you want to know whether or not you're doing the right thing and not handing your kid a loaded gun, then get him to sign a release form. If he's not willing to sign a release form, then he's not serious about his recovery. It's as simple as that. And he may not be, in which case you may have to let him go back to the environment that he was in. Because if you're going to have him in your own phone, in your own home, You want a sense of not having false security. And often the way to do that is through release forms. A good therapist is never going to share with you what the heart-to-heart talks are, but a good therapist will say, your son is coming to the sessions, your son is making progress, here are what our 5 or 6 goals are, and here's what you can do at the kitchen table to help your son. Because let's face it, the greatest therapist in the world is only going to have your kid for an hour a week. If you're going to have your kid living in your home, you're going to have them 175 hours a week. So doesn't it make sense for someone to spend time with you, mom and dad, and for you to be part of the team versus just being somebody that allows things to happen to them? The no contact thing. You know, a therapist should be found. The therapist should work on them for separate plans of whatever their triggers and roadblocks are, which are generally people, places, things, and feelings. I say to parents, if your kid's never done this, if you've never seen your kid working on this, no wonder your kid has relapsed over the last 8 to 10 years. The idea of having success has to be able to involve them developing a skill set to deal with these triggers. And you can encourage that to occur. And if they're not willing to do it, well, then you know they're not serious about their recovery. Go ahead, Lauren, just kind of plop down to the bottom here. And then, you know, the plan shouldn't only have sticks. There's a lot of sticks. Can't do this, can't do that, can't see these people, got to limit this, curfew this. The courts do it all the time. There should also be things in that plan that are rewards. 30 days, 60 days, 90 days, 6 months, and a year of sobriety are big days. They're just like birthdays. So what does the family do? What is part of their plan to have a celebration at 30 days clean? And when I say 30 days clean, I'm not talking about the 30 days in rehab. That clock starts the day they get out of jail or rehab and they have the opportunity to use out in the community. They may be in sober living, but nonetheless, they still have the opportunity to use. That's when the little ticker starts for that. And you should plan that. What are the rewards going to be? Because everyone wants something to look forward to. And their plan should have these positive things to look forward to. And they should be family things whenever possible. Things that they enjoy. A good cognitive therapist will let your son and daughter know that addiction's a brain disease. And if you can get your brain to begin to paint a different picture, play a different record, have a different storyline from a storybook, then you'll be able to overcome addiction. And that often involves sensory things with things that they enjoy. And that's part of that recovery toolbox. You build a whole bunch of those things that they can access as easily as they could access by picking up the phone and calling their drug dealer. Because if what they're going to access out of the recovery toolbox is 2 weeks away, it ain't going to work. It's got to be that day. And they can help build that. And a good therapist and a good recovery coach helps them build that. What are their goals going to be? The last thing is there's accountability down there. And that's all part of the program that we talk about with setting boundaries. What are their accountability going to be? You're going to require drops. You know, what's their money situation going to be? What's their transportation situation going to be? What is their curfew going to be? Again, if you're willing to have your son or daughter back in your life as they're regaining their sobriety, these are things that allow you to feel secure and to be sane in the whole process. The sobriety calendar, there's both a sobriety calendar and a sanity calendar that I use. The sobriety calendar would be for the person who struggles. The sanity calendar is for mom and dad and the rest of the family. Mom and dad need to organize themselves. They need to think about things that are going to help them maintain their physical health, their emotional health, their spiritual health, all those. And I say, look, use this sanity calendar and write those things down. Don't just expect them to happen to you. Think about the things that you enjoy and make them a priority in your life and put them on the calendar and go and do them. You and your husband go enjoy doing this. You and your best friends go enjoy doing this. Begin to have some activity in your life, whatever it is that you enjoy, because again, it'll allow you to move forward and begin to see all the things that you want to have. And so again, this is usually the last one I go over with my families, unless the kid can do it at a particular time. And I want the kid to be part of this because, once the kid realizes that, you know what? Mom is now going to require, if I come home, certain things like a curfew, like drops, like behavior being a certain way, like signing release forms so that she can at least know that I am going to the places that I'm going to be. If the kid isn't willing to do any of that, then the kid's not ready for full recovery. And there's nothing we can do, because there is no reason not to do any of these things. When you talk about a drop, they have the answers to the exam before the exam. The only reason they would not want to sign releases for you to know what those drops are is because they want to hide things. The same is true with their physicians. And you know what? We never have an issue signing releases for any other disease. It's only substance abuse and mental health where this comes up. If your kid had cancer, there would be no problem with getting all the information you needed to get with regards to your kid, whether he was 30 years old, 40 years old, or 18 years old. It just happens. And so we've got to start treating addiction the same way and making the kids realize that we're going to get the parents to have enough knowledge base to know what it is that's going to be safe, because we don't want parents handing their kid a loaded gun, which is often what we're doing if we continue to enable them. And as Jackie said, to allow them to continue to use without feeling any kind of consequence. And so once the kids see this, then I say to them, are you ready for true recovery? Because this is what true recovery looks like. And this is what I'm telling your parents true recovery looks like. And I guess if you're not willing to kind of do these things, then you have to really wonder whether or not we're going to believe any of your words. Because let's face it, they're always going to say, yeah, I'll do anything. I'll do anything. But once you say this is what anything looks like, all of a sudden they have to kind of think about that. And so then the very last thing of the program is we have one last assessment that we do. And that last assessment kind of talks about, you know, being able to fill in, how can we make our program better? How can we help you as a family better? What are we missing? What are we doing really well? What would you suggest that we do different? Thanks.
Thank you, Phil. I'm going to unshare. Is that okay? Are we done with the sharing? I can let this go, right? So there were a couple of questions that came through in the chat while you were talking. So let me read them to you and see if you can address them. So the first one was, what do you do with a grown adult son who's a heroin addict, living on his own with other heroin addicts, and is using daily?
Is that to me?
I believe it's to you, because these are questions that
Sure, not a
came
problem.
up in the chat while you were talking.
And I have several families who have that certain circumstance as well. And what I'll first say is, you know, where do you believe your son is at? What has he told you with respect? You think he's still using, you know he's still using, but if you were talking to him, what would he say? Would he say he's willing to get help? And if that's the case, we can have people contact him. I mean, where is he at in that process? Now, I'm more than happy to talk to these kids, and I generally talk to almost everyone. I think I've only got one family where I haven't actually talked to the kid. And all I try to do is encourage him and say, look, there's a way out of this. You know, if you want this monkey off your back, there is a way out. You don't have to feel like there isn't any way out. And then I can say to them, look, I know a little bit of history of what you've tried before, but I'm here to tell you, to some extent, it doesn't surprise me that you haven't had success, because yeah, you've gone to rehab 3 times, but it's never been more than 20 days. And I'm sorry, as a heroin addict, 20 days isn't going to buy it, you know. And we have resources in the community where we can find you 90 days or 4 months as residential or whatever, which will give you the best opportunity to move forward. And while you're there, we have people in our community who can then be these other people who wear the armor with you: recovery coaches, cognitive behavioral therapists, sponsors, places to have safe meetings, or whatever it happens to be. And so often what I'll do is I'll get a feel as to where they're at. If they're perfectly content in continuing to lead the life that they lead, we're not going to be able to do anything, because that first issue is really important: their attitude. What do they want? Do they want a different lifestyle? It's there. They can find it and they can choose it, and we'll help them, but we can only lead them to water. We can't force them to drink. And so that's generally what I do. And I have a lot of young men and young women who are kind of at that stage that are in their early 30s.
Phil, there was a question. I know we have some people here with us tonight who are working on becoming family recovery coaches and working with FAN. Do you have any problem with me sharing with those people your documents?
Oh, absolutely. No big deal. Piece of cake.
Yeah. Okay.
I see there's something on dual diagnosis, and that's a big deal, you know, because, you know, you always try to find out what came first, the chicken or the egg. And it is a big deal, because if there truly is a mental health issue, and there also happens to be substance abuse, A lot of the plan and a lot of the restrictions are very difficult to do. I have a young guy who's only 19, whom the type of drugs that he took really kind of hurt his brain. And it's going to be a while before he's well enough. He thinks he's a doctor. He thinks he has an apartment in New York. He thinks the KGB's after him. When someone has that kind of paranoia and that type of issues going on, they need help, mental health issue. And the answer to them is they really need to be hospitalized for a while. And this kid has spent a month now in Grand Rapids at Pine Rest. He's starting to do a little bit better. But you're right, you will not be able to work steps. A kid won't be able to work steps if his state of mind is that damaged and that difficult.
Thank you, Phil. So I see in the chat, Kelly is asking, she'd like the recovery coach slides. I believe that that's referring to Jackie's slides. Jackie Sanders, are you willing to share your slides?
Oh, sure. That's not a problem at all.
Okay, great. So let me just kind of open it up now to questions for any of our speakers. If anybody has any questions, you can put it in the chat, or if you want to just sort of jump in and ask a question, that would be fine too.
I have a quick question. You were talking about, Phil, you were talking about the release form, having it signed, or your kid allowing you to, or them to give the right for that. Does that interfere with the HIPAA?
No, it doesn't. I mean, that's why you have the release forms, because then it sets HIPAA aside. They can specify, and let's face it, again, let's pick cancer. You know, if the therapist can't talk to the doctor, who can't talk to the family, who can't talk to whatever, you're not going to have success in dealing with cancer or heart disease or anything else. Right. And, you know, the weird thing is the courts don't have HIPAA. You know, I can walk into any judge's, whatever, and right outside their courtroom, I can see all the cases that day, the person's full name and what they're there for, breaking and entering, rape, whatever it happens to be, okay? And so HIPAA is this made up thing that we brought about for healthcare. It was intended to make sure that no one could discriminate against them, i.e. an employer or a health insurance company. It was never intended for them to hide their disease. We know that mental health and substance abusers, part of what they do is run and hide. And HIPAA is the greatest enabling tool for them. But what clinicians don't understand is, and again, I know this a little bit, having been someone who worked in the hospital, you know, if your intent as a clinician is to save that person's life, HIPAA is set aside. Nobody's going to sue your ass for that. You can chart that the reason I reached out to this person is I felt it was necessary because I really felt that they were a harm to themselves. And if someone else didn't intercede when I released them from the ER, they were going to die. No one is going to sue a doctor in the ER, picking up the phone and calling a parent and saying, you know what? Your kid just overdosed and really needs some help. Even if the kid doesn't want him to do that, they are not going to be sued. That's not what HIPAA was intended to do. And I actually have a letter from the Secretary of Health and Human Services out of Washington, D.C. that verifies that is not the intent of HIPAA. If it's an emergency like that and your intent is to give quality care and save someone's life, then you set HIPAA aside. There is no problem with HIPAA. And we do that with every other disease. When my mom had a stroke, they rifled through her purse, saw her last name was Pavona, started calling every Pavona in the area. They didn't worry about HIPAA because we don't with any other disease. And we've got to get to the point where we start treating addiction and substance abuse like every other disease. I would not, and this is personal to me. Our son overdosed a second time. We were never called from the ER. He had been doing really well. Had we known that he had overdosed, he would not have, he wouldn't have died 4 days later. He may have died 6 months later, but we would have gotten him back into treatment. We never had the opportunity to know that our son overdosed on August 22nd and then died on August 28th. The hospital never gave us that opportunity, okay? And again, that's wrong. That's not what HIPAA was intended to do. And so it's kind of a crusade of mine. I work with a lot of physicians and say, look, you can get around HIPAA through your charting. It's as simple as that. If your intent is to save a life and provide quality care, it's not to gossip. It's not to let the insurance company know what's going on. It's not to get the kid in trouble. It's to save the kid's life. And if you chart that, you're not going to have any problem. So, but I always say to the kid, do us all a favor, sign the damn forms. And then there's no issue. And all that means is we want to know what your drug drops are. We want to know, that you're showing up to your doctor's appointment. We want to be able to have a conversation with your therapist to be able to say simply, what can we do to help? Is there anything as mom and dad or whatever? And is there a time when it's time for family counseling as well? You can never have those conversations when people are scared about HIPAA. So that's what it is.
Thank you, Phil. So we have a question in the chat for Tonya. Tonya, the question is, how has the grief support group helped you in your recovery?
Actually, I was typing my answer, but I was writing that it has helped me tremendously. I live alone, so I don't have anybody to talk to. And when I first started, I was a year into my grief. And so I had only found chat rooms online that I had been able to communicate with. And so when I found the group, when it had first started, I was in desperate need of it. And I realized that I was at a place where I was isolating, I was shutting people out. I needed it desperately. And so I just, really had gotten to a place, within the group, going every week, and then every 2 weeks when it switched to that, that I finally had gotten to a place where I had felt like I mentally had gotten basically what I needed, had grown and gotten stronger and gotten what I needed out of the group, and was considering, no longer attending the group when the person who was leading the group had to step down. And I thought, well, this, I'm a believer. So I felt like this was God's way of saying, this is your opportunity to give back and lead the group. So that's why I then took it over.
I just want to say that we are so grateful for your doing that, Tonya, and for being a part of our organization here.
Oh, this is Neil Morosky. My wife and I are divorced, and we're not even close, not even on the same page with respect to our 30-year-old son who is a drug addict. How would you help someone, or how would a coach help, a family coach help us? I mean, it's terrible. She won't communicate with me, and every time I try to communicate with her, my son's been missing, and then I'll say, well, I'll send her an email or a text or leave a message on her phone and say, I'm going to fill out a missing persons report again. And then she'll say, oh no, and then she'll respond, don't do that, he's fine. But that's all she'll tell me. How would a family coach go about helping us?
Well, the first thing I would say is this. It's much easier to be a third party from the outside and help a family, because no matter what, he's your son, not my son. And, I actually have a family that I worked with before where the mom was actually a substance abuse therapist, but the mom was wise enough to realize that she's a mom first and a substance abuse therapist second. So when it's your own kid, you are always going to revert to being a mom and or being a dad. It's very, very important that the family be on the same page. One of the things that we work on, and it's part of one of the matrices that we have, is talking about having everyone on the same page. Because if you're not, that person will utilize the person that they're getting something from very easily as their fallback every time. And let's face it, there's always times where between a mom and a dad, even when they're together, under one circumstance, dad's going to be a little stricter and mom won't be as strict. And then a few weeks later, it might be a role reversal depending upon what the circumstance is. So that happens naturally anyway, even if you're not divorced. But obviously, if I were to say, then one of the things I would say to your wife and I would say to you is, look, this is in your son's best interest. We've got to put this aside and work as a team. And the only way to do this is the two of you have to be on the same page about the things that are important. So in other words, and we play scenarios. If your son were to ask you for this, what would your response be and why? And then if you were to respond that way, what are the positive things in responding that way? And what are the negative things in responding that way? And to be honest with you, when you word it that way, often the parents begin to see there's nothing positive in it for them. When I work with a kid who tells me that he's willing to do whatever for recovery, I often say, well, one of the questions I'm going to ask you is, what's in it for your mom and dad? I know what's in it for you. You're getting a roof over your head. You're getting a roof over your head and you're getting three meals. But what's in it for mom and dad? What are they going to get out of providing that for you? What are they going to get out of providing money for you? And often the kid can't explain that, and the parents haven't even thought about that. And I say, this is your opportunity. If you want to support and not enable, this is your opportunity to, for lack of a better term, look to demand certain things. And if your son doesn't want to do it, then I guess your son will have to go through his own path. But if you're willing to help, he's got to meet you halfway and realize that a lot of it has to do with providing a sense of security and sanity for mom and dad. That's what they want, okay? And so I would try to explain to you and your wife the importance of getting on the same page and try to talk about specific things as to where you haven't been maybe, and the chaos and what that can cause with respect to actually enabling.
Yeah, you nailed it. There's chaos. You know, every time I try to reach out, it's just chaos.
Okay.
Hello, are we, suddenly there was silence. I had lost.
I'm losing connection, I think.
So
Losing connection.
Kelly Saldana, you are not muted.
Oh,
Could you please mute?
Can I say something?
am I a muter? I'm sorry.
Yeah, could you mute right now, please?
Yeah.
Thank
It says.
Okay, so Lance, you said you wanted to contribute something?
Yeah, I just want to say that I wasn't at first too happy about, these meetings, coming to these meetings, but I just want to say thank you. I'm so glad I did. That speech the gentleman just gave, the knowledge that he was just speaking, I'm sorry, I didn't catch his name. I'm an addict and alcohol. I've been doing it for years. I'm clean now and I feel good, thank God. But the way he explained it and the way the steps he said take to do it, I'll tell you, if I was still in my addiction, I would not want him to meet my family. Because they were, but he's right. You got to shut it down, And I was enabled for a long time. And the stuff he was saying, that is exactly right, And I'm just glad that I joined into this, and I'm looking forward to the ones in the future. I really am. But I just want to thank him for that. Even though I'm clean now and I have my mind made up to stay that way, I have to be vigilant all the time, because it's easy for me to slip back, So hearing things like you guys are all saying tonight helps me as well. So I just want to say thank you for letting me participate.
Well, we are really glad that you are with us, Lance, and thanks for your comments. So hope you will.
And you know what, Lance?
Yes.
As many books as I can read or as many professionals as I can meet, I learn more from people in recovery than I learned from anyone else. I ask them, once they've maintained their recovery and they've been sober for 5 years, I pick their brains. I say, look, what did your parents do that were helpful? What did your parents do that weren't helpful? What did the professionals do that were helpful? What did they do that wasn't helpful? How did you gain your sobriety and how do you maintain it? And that's what we create into our plan because we learned from you. You're the experts.
Yeah. Well, I'm trying to figure it out. I guess I never will. I just got to accept it. But I am now. And, I think another thing, I just want to say this, that I had been to a lot of rehabs, been to jail, been through all that stuff. And I truly did want to quit using, but there were some things that I didn't address that allowed me to do that. One of them was that I wanted instant gratification. Instead of doing the right things and slowly obtaining the things I wanted, I tried to shortcut that, and another thing is I just had to be honest and say, this is who I really am, and like you said too, a person has to get sick of being sick and tired. Now, I'll say this and I'll let you go, but my mother enabled me for many, many years, right? But when I quit drinking, this is what happened. I called home. It was back when they had operators to, set that call. And they said, yes, you have a collect call from Lance Kenner at the Sussex Correctional Institution. My mother said, I'm sorry, but the Lance I knew died at age 13 when he took his first drink of alcohol and hung the phone up. And she was right, because I had become somebody else. But that right there, man, that, I don't know, that caused a shift up there. That's when I started saying, wow, I've really got to do something, But I'm just thankful that there's people out like you that, care enough, because a lot of people think it's a moral weakness, and it's not. There's a lot more involved, like my self-esteem issues. I I didn't like who I was, so I had to. As long as I'm uncomfortable, I'm always going to try to change that feeling. Always, somehow or another. Again, you can use it by drugs, alcohol, women, drugs, whatever, or you can take your time and start doing the right thing, and then all the things you want and wish for that are good for you, they'll come to you. They'll come to you. But it takes time and patience. Got to have patience. And I'm sorry for the loss I heard of everybody that's lost somebody, and it is difficult, but we can honor their deaths by doing the right thing. So.
Thanks so much, Lance, for your comments. I really appreciate it. I think it's really helpful. There was another question in the chat that I want to throw out, and I think this for either Jackie or Phil. The question is asking for an explanation of the difference between a recovery coach and an interventionist.
Oh, go ahead, Phil.
Thank you. The way I view it, and I look at an interventionist as being someone, it's almost like doing an intervention, okay? And what I do is, when I've worked with families before, I always say there's a 4-tiered process. Step 1 is to allow them to make the right decision. Give them an opportunity to make that decision themselves. So ask them if they're willing to do it. And let's start out there. Now, often they're not willing to do it because this isn't the first rodeo or whatever. Okay, so then step 2 is the idea of accountability factors and letting parents know that they have the right to do certain things that may then push them in that direction. I have no qualms with what we call the nudge from the judge. It's often very helpful. I look at jail as being a lifesaver. That's not where I want the person to spend time, but if they're doing heroin, you got one of 3 choices: death, getting clean, or incarceration. And so I use incarceration when the person isn't willing and or able to get clean yet, because incarceration then allows you to have something that you didn't have before, which is the ability to now demand something. You all want out of jail? Okay, this is what has to happen. Okay, and they all get Jesus in jail, but that's the time for a parent to say, I am willing to do these 5 things, providing you're willing to do these 5 things. And you know what? We're going to work that out with the judge. It's not just going to be you and I working this out. It's going to be your probation officer. It's going to be your judge. It's going to be a whole team approach as to how we're going to do this. So if you're blowing smoke up my butt today and choose to change your mind 2 weeks from now, your butt's going back to jail, because the judge is decreeing that your being released is going to be based on these certain things. And we have enough good relationships with our judges who understand and support that, including our prosecuting attorneys. So when you say an interventionist, give them the opportunity. If they don't, then throw them some things that are difficult. For instance, if they've got kids and they're still using heroin, they're not able to raise those kids. And so I'll often say to the parents, this may be the time for you to intervene with your grandchildren, because you know what? Your grandchildren are at risk. If this person's using heroin every day, the likelihood that they can take care of these kids is nil. And therefore, it's time to have a conversation saying, look, it's time for us to help you and to you to reach out for us. Or you know what? I think we're going to pick up the phone and have a conversation with CPS. And that now allows them to make the choice based on that. If they choose not to, then I say, look, you've already gone down this path. Now we say, look, talk to your husband, talk to the rest of the family. Is this what you want to say to them? Because if you say it, you have to go through with it. And I'm here to tell you, I think you should go through with it, because your son should not be driving his 2 kids around in a car When he's a heroin addict, he's high every day. You're asking for death. You're asking for trouble and you're asking for death. If that doesn't work, then I often say, okay, let's try to do an intervention to where we actually meet with your son or daughter and we put the family together. We put the family plan together. Mom, dad, grandpa, grandma, grandkids, whatever it happens to be. Write a letter, have it begin in love, have it get to the nitty gritty in the middle, have it end in love. And then at that place, you read the letter to them. You don't give it to them, you read it to them. You ask them to look you in the eye and you actually read the letter. And then once you finish the letter, you hand it to them and say, this letter is yours, and then go to the next person. And each person is saying things like, I remember the first time I saw your eyes when the nurse handed me, after birth. I remember you playing soccer. I remember this. All these, you hit the emotions because the drug may have their brain, it never has their heart. And therefore you go after those emotions, okay? And then you have who you think would be the person that has the greatest impact on that person. It may be grandma, okay? It may be a grandpa. It may be their own daughter, whatever it happens to be. That person ends it with saying, look, we love you. We want you to go into treatment. We are not here to create pain in your life. We're here to love you and help you. But it's necessary that you get treatment. Will you please get treatment? And after hearing from 8, 9, 10 family members, 90% of the time they'll go to treatment. But I always work with the families and I say, but ahead of time, you got to have that treatment facility ready. And so what I do in the background is I have an admission date for either that afternoon or the next day. And I say to them, look, we don't know if it's going to happen. If it happens, we will hand the phone to the person, they will talk to you, and they will come in that day because we're doing an intervention. And so I know the treatment places like to have an assessment done ahead of time. But what I say to them is, look, we can't let this person have 5 days from now or 8 days from now. It ain't going to work. When they say, okay, I'll go into treatment, we want mom to say, go ahead and pack up your bags. I'm going to bring you the phone. You can talk to the treatment facility because we're going this afternoon. And that's how you do it. So that's an intervention. That's different than a recovery coach. A recovery coach is actually working with the family and trying to set a template down to allow them to have sanity in their life, but to also explain to them some of the things that can work in addictions, that they know where to set boundaries and how to set boundaries with their kids and what success can look like. And so those are, in my opinion, the two differences between the two.
Thank you so much, Phil. So we are a little bit beyond our normal time. So we typically will conclude at 8, but this was a very interesting discussion with lots of questions. And so first of all, I want to give a huge thank you to our 3 speakers, Tonya, Jackie, and Phil. Thank you so much for giving your time tonight and sharing all the information that you did. Yep, I really appreciate it. And so I'm going to, just for a second here, share my screen again, because I want to, you've heard a lot of information today that you may want to have access to. And let me just see here, how I can do this. And so I wanted to, again, just provide you with the information that, how you can contact us, right? If you're looking for more information. So again, if you need resources, information, or support, send us an email and we can get it to you. So the email address is right there. As I mentioned earlier, our next public forum is going to be on December 7th. We always start at 6:30 p.m. Keep an eye on our Facebook page. There'll be a post that'll give you more detail about what that forum is going to be about. And again, if you wanted, we have an email list as well. So if you're not on it and you want to be on it, send an email to us, to the Northwest Wayne Families Against Narcotics at familiesagainstnarcotics.org to get on our list. And then you don't have to necessarily check the Facebook page, because we send out information about whatever events we're doing, flyers for our public forums, et cetera, to our email list. And then lastly, again, here is our YouTube channel right at the bottom here. So this will be placed on our YouTube channel. Recordings from our prior public forums are also there. So feel free to check it out, and you'll be able to get more information that way. So again, thank you all for joining us tonight. And this is November, so I guess Thanksgiving is coming up. I hope that all of you have a wonderful Thanksgiving and a wonderful November. And I look forward to seeing you all in December. Thanks again, Tonya and Jackie. Yes, a question?
Can I ask one question?
Sure.
With the COVID and everything that's going on, about treatment centers and sober living and things like that, is that still available or is it harder to get into now
It's so
with the
interesting.
COVID?
It's so interesting, Teresa, you should ask that because I actually just did a sort of informal survey of treatment centers and recovery homes in our local area. It wasn't by any means comprehensive, but I was sort of asking that same general question. And for the most part, treatment centers are taking patients on an inpatient basis. Recovery homes are taking clients. It is on a reduced basis though, right? Because they have to have proper spacing. They have to make sure that things are properly, sterilized and social distancing and all of that. So they don't have the same capacity that they did, but they are taking people. And in fact, I just got an email today from Jason Schwartz at St. Mary's that their chemical dependency unit has just reopened as of today. So bit by bit it is. On the flip side, telehealth is huge right now, and it's making a huge. A lot of the treatment facilities are offering IOPs and individual therapy on a virtual basis. So that's available as well. So if you want more information about that, like I said, I just did a little bit of work on that. Feel free to shoot an email and I'll send you what I have.
Okay, great. Thank you.
All right. Thank you, everybody. Have a wonderful November and hope to see you in December.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.